their scaps, so they're locking their shoulder blades. What you'll find at all age levels, even into Irish 20s, is guys will still at times hinge from their knees. If they're hinging from their knees, they're not going to be in a position to make good connections, and they're not going to be in a position to create that parallel picture with the back, so parallel with the floor. On the bind call of the referee, we go to brace and call from both all players into strong body shape and the tension of the joints. Set, we would hit 2, 3, sync, and we get a collective call of all 8 players. Post engagement, there's an onus on us. You'll hear it all the time in the national squad. It was something that Greg Feek brought in, and he would say inch is the word that you'd have your 6 and 7 calling consistently. To just talk up, and you see the energy that back rowers in, say, the middle row, so 4, 5, 6, and 7, the energy that they can give to their front row to G them up to get into that scrum is really important. So the reason that the word was chosen in relation to inch is everything about their mentality at the Irish team at that time, coming in kind of 2015, was all about winning the inch. If we can win an inch, we can compress their chest an inch, and we can compress their hips, we can compress their knees, we can lift them an inch, we can drop them an inch. So in relation to all those technical areas, that inch is what you're consistently fighting for. And that calling cadency from the 6 and 7 is really, really important. What you get then from that position is our set engagement and our hooker. He would be our director. He's the arrow point. He's the head of that arrow point, and he creates the solidity of the front row. He must boss the setup, and he must lead this. He must have the personality to do that, which you'll find in younger kids is really important, and often comes a lot of the time from the smaller guys, because they have to fight that little bit harder. So to change that and get that mentality right is really, really important. Second row, keep connecting and try not to move his hips too much during the setup, especially during the strike. So he's an onus on controlling his second rows, which is a challenging job in any environment. He's to coordinate with the 9 the delivery of the ball and strike the ball effectively through various channels and options. The more various channels that come in is probably the higher up the levels that you're going. I wouldn't get too bogged down on that. The important thing is you get the game restarted with as positive a picture as you can. Clear tactical appreciation of the scrum position on the field, positions of left, straight and right, which would be example green, white and gold. The importance of that is the tactical play that you come off that. So the connections with the backs, they naturally have a connection with it, but say for what Keane was talking about earlier, that understanding of exactly what they need at that time and moment is really, really important. To help encourage guys to get that picture is even more important. The opportunity to disrupt opposition ball effectively with good timing as a unit of 8 and 16 feet of the ground. So in opposition ball, really important to try and create a very square picture and do it collectively rather than create lots of angles and do it individually, because you have more chance as a collective than you do as an individual. And you need the ability to problem solve with both props through the attack and defense. So the ability of understanding how to close off your left shoulder, that can come at any age. That doesn't need to be a senior thing. Closing off your left shoulder, it happens more often because the tight head is engaged between 2 opposition heads. The right shoulder is naturally quite strong. It's the left shoulder when the loose head, say, loses connection with his hips and drifts out to the left, then that left shoulder for hookers becomes really, really disjointed and can be exposed. That's why you'll see a lot of tight head props come across the scrum, because that's often the natural seam that will open up in that zone. When we look at our tight head prop, he must be the most disciplined with technique and keep minimal foot movement to apply absolute constant pressure. You'll see a lot of this in the changing of split stance setups as opposed to double footed. When we say double footed, they're 2 feet or back. Okay, as opposed to split stance, you would have a right foot lead and a left foot anchor. The most important thing that they can do is win that head space. So where their head is going and the point that they're picking on the opposition, it's not just go in and close your eyes, it's look and identify where there's a weakness. There's always going to be a weakness at some point within the 10 to 15 scrums potentially on the day, where you're going to find a weakness within the opposition, and that can be the key moment. And one key word that you'll hear a lot in everything in rugby nowadays is squareness. and potentially it has come particularly from tight head props. Their ability to stay as square in their hips as possible and not go and create angles through their hips, but to rather create angles through their shoulders and through what they can do with their right hand on lifting players up or pushing them out or dropping them down a little bit. Okay, a little bit more advanced, but the key concept is to do all of those things, you must be square. Keeping connections through joints. So the joints that we would talk about would build your power from the ground up. So you would talk about ankles, knees, hips, trunks, and then that binding arm into position with your hooker. So your left armpit would be your final connection. Let's go all the way from the ground up. Focusing on chest out and down, and we would say through and square. So down and through would be one of the key things that we would look for. Often when people think of scrummaging when they're winning, picture-wise is stepping up or making the opposition step up. That's done through a process of finding your chest and getting your chest down to the ground, but not bending at your hip, keeping your hips nice and square, but your back parallel to the ground as well. Chest height low to combat loose head attack. So the bigger barrely chest younger men that you might have in the 14s, 17s, 18s groups, they'll be far better tight head props in the long term than somebody who is a smaller barrel chest, I suppose. Okay, so even in profiling, that'll be things that you could look at to say, if he digs in, if we get the right mentality around him and support him in the right way, he could have serious potential. Discipline with the bind, always have hands up, so he would have almost a boxer stance with that right hand, always covering that right ear, and then ability to punch into the space where they want to go. They, as always, have to have ability to problem solve with the hooker and the flank and the second row through the attack and defense. So we'll get a little bit more into that and picture-wise on that. From a lock point of view, I don't want to break it down too much into tight head locks and loose head locks and their roles, but the main focus is to focus on channels, particularly for a loose head lock and their setups, but to keep their body shape low, down and through, keep their hips in, so don't let their hips come up. It's a natural tendency to stick their ass up into the air. You want to get those hips down as low as possible, but not compromising any pushing position. Heel to knee and pre-setup. So what we talk about there, a lot of second rows would get their left knee, for example. If they were leading with their right foot was bent into the ground and their left knee was back behind them with sprigs in the ground, we want to get that heel and knee as close together in whatever split stance that you want. There are other second rows that will go double-footed, as we spoke about, like the tight head props, and that's a preference for yourselves. For me, I would always go with split stance, heel to knee. If I can get that ratio right, we'd be in a pretty good position. Fellas like Ultimate Delan would struggle with that for limb length. So having a longer limb length than his lower limbs would struggle with that at times. So it's horses for courses, and it's for what suits best to the individual and adapt to that. Elbows tight and bind high on the shoulder. Most important thing is small talk to the forward front row and both shoulders on during that set as well. Back row 6 and 7. Again, one of the key things that we need to focus on is the first job is to scrum, provide constant pressure and tension through the prop, and eyes must be up. They must be able to go to their next job, but their first job is to scrum, to provide energy to the front row, second rows, particularly the prop that they're engaged with, and to feel what that scrum is going and eyes up on the ball. On contact, focus on body shape and neck position, strong and readjust with the eyes on the ball. So always focused, ball focused, that's their secondary job. Primary job is to make the scrum function. Secondary job is to be first to the breakdown. Our ball to ensure they can keep square, come into the opposition's loose head ribs if needed. So something that's probably a little bit more advanced, but it's still quite valuable even at, say, into pro 18s, 19s level, that the ability to understand when to rib and when not to. So when we say to rib, if the tight head has gone very square and the opposition loose head steps out and shows him his ribs, he's entitled to take that picture, we would say. Referees will often struggle to see that, so it's worth looking at. Provide vocals and timings on ball entry, so the inch that we spoke about, and also when we actually directly want to go into that scrum with the ball, so opposition in particular.
And
working shoulders to create, yeah.
Just a couple of questions there coming in just while they're relevant on the piece that you're looking at. Would you go with a split stance or both feet back for your tight head to minimize much foot movement for your tight head? Which one would be your preferred? And another query is, what foot positions would you like for your 6 and 7?
Okay, to answer the tight head prop question, I would always go with split stance. We work off a principle of push-pull, so it's kind of difficult. We can see it in a video a little bit later, but there's a push-pull policy that allows you with the split stance that you don't get with 2 feet back. When you have 2 feet back, you end up in a position where your hips are your hinge. If I have a very aggressive loose head, he will be able to push your hips back if we get the right way through on the tight head. So if we get the tight or the loose head, opposition loose head and hooker to target the tight head with 2 feet back, we can compress his hips again. The only way he can get to a power position post that is to move his feet, and that's what we want him to do. So it's kind of something I wouldn't be in preference to, but then you can get 130 kg prop, 140 kg tight head prop, who will be very difficult to move. So it's kind of going up the levels, and even at a lower level, you know, you get big boys in a tight head props. Can you move them? Probably not, because they're not in the strength category just yet, your personnel. So it's worth thinking about on that. In relation to the back rows, I would still stick with a split stance policy. You'll see a lot of what the Hurricanes have done. A lot of them naturally would stand, say, if we were on a tight head prop on the right hand side of the scrum, we would have right foot forward and left foot back. That would be a natural position that a lot of us would have taken during our playing days and even today. You'll see a lot of the Hurricanes would do it through Artie Sevilla. He likes to switch that up. He likes to bring his left foot forward and his right foot back. And in speaking to the scrum coach over there, he says that he feels he gets more weight in onto the prop because he feels his diagonal pressure between his left shoulder and his right leg gives him a better ability to keep the tight head in particular, say in that situation. So a lot of that information is coming back from the likes of Conan O'Donnell, who was scrummaged over there, where they'll try new things and they're willing to challenge themselves in those things as well. I think we have to be that way. Find what's right. I suppose that would be the big thing. If you have a tight head prop that can keep both feet back, great. If it doesn't work, find another way. That's kind of the key to it. Does that answer the questions, Molly? Is there any more?
Yeah, that's perfect, Amby. Just to the group, feel free to post any questions there. I know we're getting into a lot of detail and you will see some visuals of it in a moment. So again, if there's anything relevant to your own team or any questions that are coming up based on what Amby's saying, feel free to post them up there during the presentation.
Great, a bit more video footage coming now after the next slide, guys, okay? And a chance for you to kind of ask a little bit more in the moment questions if you feel up to it. Working shoulders to create tension and work, always trying to add value, no meerkats, so we want really neat scrum through our connections, okay? Meerkats poking their heads up out of the hole. We don't want that. Stay focused on your job. Keep your eyes on the ball. If ball goes left and you're on the right side, get to the opposite side. It's very, very simple. Okay, basics must be done very well for them to identify and do their first job. Okay, it's the goal of all back rows. Basics done really, really well. Number 8 is to lead and oversee the balance and integrity of the scrum and must work with the hooker to establish this. Focus on the number 8 being a third lock with a strong body position. We don't want leaders. We want to try and create 8 players adding worth and adding value to the actual scrum each and every time. The 8 loads the 2 second rows on their feet. I don't know what some people might like to, you know, the old gun, the kind of chariots of fire, hold them back. It's probably not picture-wise, isn't relevant to the referee, but it is still get away. It does get away with at times. For me, he would adopt the exact same stance that a hooker would. Right foot lead in between the 2 second rows, inside feet, and then from that he can manage to sit back and hold the weight and almost release the handbrake as the scrum engages. Okay, so it's a lot of different things there for you. Choice is yours, but he has to be adding value. He has a functional role with the halfbacks to our clean launch, but his primary goal is to get off the scrum and get the scrum to function as 8, because 8 versus 7, you're going to lose that battle already. You've already lost 2 of your 16 feet, so 13 versus 16. That is how we set it. 16 feet on the ground, adding value each and every time. Okay, so just one of the things that we'll look at here, and we'll share a few screenshots. I suppose, you want to go into that breakout, Molly? You just have people look at this scrum and see what they see, I suppose. So I'm going to play it, Molly. I'll play it 3 times. So each individually, in yourself and your own groups, it'll only be 5-6 second clip is all it is. Just to see what you see within that scrum and that setup, to see if you can try and add some value to your own scrummaging knowledge, I suppose. So
Okay.
I'll play it once full time and just identify what you think is happening and occurring in this location.
That's working here, Amber, yeah.
Great. And I just play one final time. If you want it again, guys, just let us know. Think back when you look at it of balance, stability, tension, connections, squareness. Think about those measures that you consistently have in your scrum. So the key to it for me, if I just play once more, would be when you go into your breakout rooms, just think about what you see in relation to balance and stability.
If you can, just make some notes on what your thoughts are on this scrum, the pros and cons, and you'll be able to trash them out in the breakouts then as well and bring the various opinions.
Okay, I'll just play it again, once slowly and once quickly. And for the final time, okay, Molly will break you out there into small groups, and we'll come back and have a chat in maybe 2 or 3 minutes on what your observations were on it, to see if you saw anything or if you didn't, or what cues you might give if they're relevant to you in your coaching capacity.
Okay, so if I could ask you again just to designate a spokesperson for your room, and we'll now shoot you off into the rooms, and you'll get an invite to join. Everyone's back in the room, so I'll hand over to Amby. If you want to head to group 1, there would be Chris Ryan, Dermot Tierney, who is the spokesperson from you guys.
Any feedback, guys, on what you saw group 1?
Kieran, Paddy, James, Dermot Tierney, Chris Ryan.
Nobody wants to volunteer. Suppose a few of the poor side or the bad points, maybe just a bit footwork on the tight head. He didn't seem to have his feet steady. Same with his, he started off tight to his hooker and ended up pulling away from him.
Great, yeah. So in this space, you can all see this video as we're talking, guys, can you?
Yeah, that's good, Amby.
Great. Good, Chris. Yeah, so you're looking at that tight head. He's focused on his connection, and then he focuses on his feet, and he completely loses that. Does that picture look bad, I suppose, to you, Chris? just as from that picture there.
From a second row point of view, it looks lovely. But
yeah, exactly. So he's finding probably got a good way to kind of measure with these, particularly at any age level, would be place a ball in there. So if you can place a rugby ball in that space there, and they can keep their hips as tight, because you know, Chris, I have a fairly big mallet, and I was in the second row every once in a while. But
yeah,
get in there, you know, it's something that you're going to feel. So good way to test them. I'm never getting into this position, you know. And once he makes room for me, immediately his spine is going to go offline and his hip is going to come out to here, and that's where you naturally create angles then for new sets. Okay, good, great. Anyone else? Group 2 maybe? You might throw it out there, lads, or we'll be here all night.
Yeah, group 2 here. So we kind of similar that they were kind of working as individuals at the start. We thought there was good tension between the loose head and the hooker, but again the tight head took a long time to get his feet steady, pulling away from his hooker a bit, a lot of movement, and he was working a bit individually. What else have we got? Yeah, his foot positioning again on that tight head. He also has his hand down, like you said before, to have your hand up like a boxer and ready to punch through. He's not on that. One of the guys brought up as well that the binding, he thought the binding was a little low, could be a bit up higher, is what they're used to. And you can also, yeah, here and the hooker as well.
Okay. The hooker, you want him a little bit higher.
Yeah.
For that, Ali, is you know yourself is up towards that armpit.
Yeah.
Once you start dropping shoulders back or hands binds back, you end up in a position of not being able to maneuver your shoulders. Yeah. So that can leave you in a position where your head feels like it's going to pop off. Or if you're a little bit higher, you can get your weight back left or right as the scrum adapts, I suppose.
Another thing is the opposition team, the far side, looked lower. They got set a lot lower than the near side. So their body height was a bit high. Yeah, I think that was pretty much it.
Good. Just to come back to that point here on this, on these three, we want to try and keep a seminal height, so something that we can all work with. So he's probably fighting a little bit lower than him and lower than him. So you get this kind of fall away feature. We prefer it to be as level as possible and create a much better picture. The only way that can happen is if this tight head here on this side widens his base. So similar to the picture that we have here, and maybe even a little bit wider here on these boys. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Gareth. Cheers. Anyone else in group 3?
Group 3 is Brian, Shorty, Seamus, Stephen. Anyone there want to put their hand up?
I'll give it a. How are you doing, lads? Right. Yeah, I think you covered most of what we went through as well. We thought the hooker started probably a bit too high on this side. He could have hinged or got down lower, maybe within 20 degrees of where he would want to set the scrum. Leg position again on the tight head, we thought was very unstable. Probably a bit too far into the channel there. And the bind. But yeah, the far side we found, all right, they did set low, but as you said, that fall away, and we thought they were unstable a bit.
Yeah.
And that was generally...
Great. Go back to that fundamental principle. 100% what you're saying about the channel issue here, and he adjusts himself. And in trying to be as tight as possible here, he actually ends up changing his shoulder position. So now his shoulders are pointing more in this direction. Whereas what we really want from him is that square picture upfield. If we can get that off from square picture, we're probably in a much better way. A way that we can adjust that as a suggestion would be, I'm not too worried about where they bind. You can even come back here to mid back onto the short, or if they're happier there, but they have to have the length and arm to be able to produce that left shoulder as a tight head in particular. So that would be something that you'd look for. A lot of guys will try to tuck and stay in behind their hooker. You got to get them out in order to get their barrel chest out. Harry, in fairness to him, is a decent scrummager, but he's dog more than technique. You know, he's got a bit of mental ability to stay in that fight. So that would have been one of his issues. Just one thing we might bring to point here, as you did identify on the far side. The main reason why I stopped this is because of, again, this tight head not getting his shoulder out. If we look slowly at what actually happens to the scrum on the crouch, So at this point here, if we watch the tight head and the hooker, he has his channel where he wants to attack, and maybe a little bit head on head, but that happens sometimes. So he's in his position, and then he gets dropped out of it. See how the head comes across? Once his head comes across, he's opening this seam. That's all you're looking for as a hooker. You want to find a little seam in there, and then it's a 2v1, and that's where you're going to dominate your scrum. So you don't even need to create angles. What you can do with your head position and having a tight head, too tight as we identified here, the same issue is happening on the far side. So you've lost the stability of the scrum because it all shifts off to the left-hand side. All of the weight starts going left over to this direction here as I'm looking from behind them. All the weight starts going there, and then you have to see that shift that comes just right at the end. So now they're trying to adjust their positions in the scrum. It's not going to be a good picture. If you can get them square and straight early, you're going to get a much better picture and value for your scrum and everything that you're doing.
Andy, do you have a preference on the tight head being a bit further up, because he's on that, the tight head is behind the hooker, he's not hitting there at all.
Which side? On the near side?
On the near side, yeah.
So once again, to get him up, kind of one of the good measures that you'd have all the time is if you look at this shorty and how this picture develops, we have a tight head back and we have a loose head back in behind the hooker. What you'd want picture-wise, and we've often brought it, if you grab a flagpole or anything, all those hips should be in line, okay? There'll obviously be an issue with trunk length at times, but all of those hips should be in line, and that will give you the picture that you're looking for. If you keep that pole in behind them, when they go to crouch, a lot of them will bend from their knee and sit back. And that's why you get that picture of one forward, one behind, a little bit behind. He feels like he's forward, but he's actually not. Does that make sense, Shorty, does it?
Yeah, completely.
You would most definitely want them further up. Good measure, all those hips in line, and you'll probably be in a good picture to getting all those shoulders in the right places.
Ambrose, would you give that tight head move his left leg to the right a little bit?
Most definitely. He's killing that. There would have been an old time when you'd be hooking yourself.
Yeah.
The tight head would go in here into the inside of this. You want them as square as possible and their feet as level as possible.
You can even see there the way his left leg is pointing towards his right shoulder, and you said he had to move his left shoulder in, so his shoulder's going in opposite direction to where he's pushing, kind of.
100%.
He's twisting himself.
Yeah, everything works on a diagonal here when you're actually in your scrum position. So this shoulder here is dominated by what this foot does, and vice versa. So what you're talking about there and pointing towards that shoulder, it's already turned him in, but the double factor comes in that, Ali, in where it's actually tucked in here. He needs to loosen his bind, come mid back, use the spine as the measure, and find out where he's comfortable along there. Often a lot of guys, Finley, for example, would love to turn his fists in. So he would be palm out towards us, and he would find himself much more comfortable to get his shoulders through into that position there. So yeah, really good point. Really good point. Another group there quickly, and we just have one more clip afterwards that might that help you.
Okay, I'll open it up to any of group 4, 5, or 6 there. If anyone wants to.
Hi, this is Dave from Group 5. Just a really quick question. Most of the stuff we've raised, you've already gone through. But you see the way the loose head near us and the hooker are really tight, and they've mirrored each other's stance rather than matched, as in one is right leg back, one is left. Is there an argument that the tight head could put his left leg forward and right leg back? Would that get his hips tighter to the hooker, or is he better going matching him?
No, he's in the right position. For me, he's in the right position. I've never seen very rarely, I don't even think in history, there's been a tight head that would have led with his left foot and kept his right foot back. Mainly
because he's trying to stay out.
Yeah, mainly is because, once again, we talk about that diagonal of power. He wants to stay as strong as he can. So when he lifts this leg out of the ground, he's got to dominate this shoulder by what he does, having power in the ground here in this space. So
Okay.
I'll say that again. What he does with this shoulder is dominated by this foot. So when he lifts this on the bind phase, which he has to take it out of the ground as quickly as possible and return it to the ground, then that's going to expose that side. That's the only avenue that the loose head has to come in. The hooker is never going to dominate him on his own, but the loose head here has an opportunity to come in there. If he
And the
uses
other question we had is what the boys were doing where they kind of before they put their heads in, where they're kind of rubbing heads off each other. That's kind of illegal now, isn't it?
Technically,
Yeah.
technically it's illegal. What we'd be looking at, particularly for our hookers, is they never want your hooker to, if I was setting up the scrum and they had set up, I would expect my hooker to set up second. I would expect them to set second in relation to the sink as well. Because once the opposition have set up, they've picked their positions that they're going to. Now it gives you an opportunity to see their weakness. Whereas if you're down there and crouched on the sink early, you leave all the avenues open for me to shift a little bit and adjust a little bit. What we'd always be looking for is, there's usually a crest here on the right-hand side of this boy on the far side. That would be kind of the optimum position to get into as an opposition hooker. So usually crest on the right breast, that would be a position that you could go after. Because if you stay in there, you'll bring him with you and you'll naturally dominate that tight head, rather than going off into that space there as a 2v1 into there.
So the hooker nearest is doing the right thing to stay up and see that the tight head opposite him isn't set right.
Exactly. So whoever sinks second, in this case, they both sink at the same time. If I was in that position, I would hold for that sink call and I'd be half a second up here, just looking for that opportunity where there's a weakness. Because every scrum is individual. It's an individual moment in an individual game. There is going to be an opportunity. Somebody is going to drop their concentration for a moment in that 35th minute or anything like that, or in that first minute. So the opportunity will present itself. Are you ready to take that opportunity? So setting down second on that sink would be something. We used to try that with the Irish 20s, and they'd both stand up for as long as they could, and they just mess up your session. So there's pros and cons to it, I suppose, in that sense. But yeah, that'll be my focus on it. Find that crest on the right chest for the hooker. Sit up a little bit opposite them. You get your tight head in nice and square.
Just for clarity there, Amby, just a question on the chat. You're talking about the crest on the jersey, that they should be aiming their head towards that or getting into there.
Yeah. So yeah, I won't see it here on this. So see this crest here, for example.
Yeah.
That was here on this right-hand side. So on his right chest, on the hooker on the far side, I would be expecting the near side hooker to go after that crest into that space there. That's exactly the line he wants to go through into that hooker, because that will keep the tight head square and it will keep your loose head on the outside a little bit with an ability to come in and across. But if we end up with head on head, he ends up having to turn his head out. The second he turns his head out, he changes the direction of his spine. So what we want is simple. It's an old school thing of spine and line. We can keep his spine square, his spine square, his spine square. We then end up in a position of attacking them directly straight. Straight as 3 is always better than one on his own stepping out and coming across. Does that answer the question, Mo?
Yeah, that's perfect, Abby.
Good. I just have one more clip for you guys. If you can bear with us, I'll get it up here on the screen share. Just one of the drills that we found the kids liked an awful lot, particularly with the RDS groups and things like that, was this buck and bronco drill. So once again, one of the questions asked, we're running from a variety of ages here, from under 14s and beyond, or under 13s and beyond. This best body shape, people talk about 120 degrees in their hips. It's not a mathematical science that is correct. But what it does allows us to get a good picture here of about 110 to 130. They kind of pick that mid-range. One of the key things that you'll find in this drill is kids will lose their feet, or boys will lose their, girls will lose their feet because they're not pushing through their heels. Pushing through the heels is fundamental for them to keep a good, strong body shape. So that keeps them in the ground rather than on the ground. And that mentality would be really important in asking and cueing afterwards, were your feet in the ground or were they on the ground? Because they're two completely different things. So once they get a feel for that, and often a good way to measure and test that is close their eyes. So if you get guys in that position and identify what they feel, because particularly as front row forwards, your feel is everything. How did it feel in there would be a massive question. And it's not an emotional feel, it's what did you physically feel? Because emotionally it's quite challenging anyways in there for most front row forwards. So in that picture, we get them into strong body shape. Now, from this boy in this position, he's still working his body shape as well. Okay, it mightn't look like it just yet, but he's also going to work his neck strength in this position here. He get his head in underneath, find exactly the spot, and we call it a buck and bronco drill because we want to try and buck him out. So you'll see in a moment he'll try and force him. So what this forces this individual to do facing towards me, he will have to fight his weight down towards his right-hand side. So instead of being in a position of your scrum, your 8-man scrum continually collapsing, reduce the size, diversify the drill, and then you can get an ability to get way more value on and feel out of your contact session. So within an hour session, this could be your warm-up. This could be your physical warm-up rather than hitting chests off each other or whatever sports analysis is there. This is a position every single player is going to be on the pitch at some stage, whether you're a back or a forward, because that's your breakdown position. So a really good drill that's useful to everyone, but creates great value in scrum time as well. So within that on the drill, he will try and force him out, try and lift him up into that spot, lift him up through his chest. So this boy has stretched his neck strength through this moment here. Let's get back to this. So when he gets his head in there into that moment, he's trying to lift him up, so buck him out essentially. So buck and bronco is what we come up with the name of it. He's still practicing his good position. He still has really good trunk strength, really good ankle and knee stability, and he's trying to create good connections between what his neck is doing and his T-spine here and everything that happens through his trunks. So nothing is in isolation. So what more would happen in a lot of those drills at times with age grade guys is they would end up kicking their asses up into the air to try and fight that. So it allows them to fight through. Okay, another way that you can diversify that drill is get them on a 360. So just a quick push into this space here and then get this boy's head out and rotate around, find another head position and hit head and shoulders here, head and shoulders the far side, both sides of the trunk, and then come into a second row position, a scrummaging position behind. So you have 6 points, 1, 2, far side, 3, 4, 5, and 6th one being the near side scrummaging position. So just an idea for that. We can send you footage on that as well. There's no problem there. But just good things to create value in everything that you do and across the board in your scrummaging group and across the board in your teaching group for your breakdown. Okay, that's pretty much it, guys. There's a million other things and a million other videos we could show you and share with you. So if there's anything that you want, just get in touch and we'll see if we can assist you over the near future. I'd like to thank you for your time and once again go back to those 3 questions. I hope you liked something. I hope you didn't hate my voice. I've been working very hard on it and I hope you loved some part of it. If you build a love for the scrum within your forwards at a young age group, you will get serious buy-in and value from it. With many drills like that, if you get a love for that buck and bronco drill, I know 14, 15, 16-year-olds love it because they love to have a go at each other. That's what rugby is all about, boys and girls all over the place. So thank you for your time. I know it's run a little bit over, so apologies for that. I could talk scrum all day long.